I don't know how many of you got to the Richard Quest event that we ran a couple of years ago. Did anyone go to the Richard Quest alumni event? That was a phenomenal event. Richard Quest is the anchorman for CNN's international news and an alumnus of the university and gave an amazing lecture. So when I was asked if I would do the alumni lecture, initially I thought, well, I wonder who the main speaker is. And maybe I'm the warm-up act. And I thought, oh yes, I'm sure I could introduce somebody really really good. And then it just dawned on me as this got nearer and nearer, there was no main act. It was me. So I'm both your warm-up act and your main act combined. So what I really want to do is to spend some time with you talking about how a good idea can become a real business opportunity. And I want to introduce you to some little bits of theory that might help to shape our thinking in this. And because we're a relatively intimate group here, I'm also going to ask for your help at various points. So please do chip in. And I've been to a few alumni events, and I recognise one or two people from them and other people from programs we've run in Leeds. So I can see a few familiar faces. So I'm beginning to relax into my role. So what we're going to do is look at business models in a way that will help us to understand when a good idea really is a business opportunity. And of course I'm going to use small business, growing business as examples of this. But I thought my first example, just to get us in the mood, would be a big company. Because we often think that entrepreneurship is all about new business, new startup. But in fact, entrepreneurship is just as important for large firms and governments as it is for new startups. So my initial example is going to be a big firm challenge. So I don't know how many of you are keen motorcyclists. Anybody here a keen motorcyclist? Thank you. So at least one person in the room will understand this story to start with, and hopefully we'll all understand it by the end. But what I want to do is talk about the challenging that a big brand, a big company has in developing new markets. What sort of behaviour do they need to exhibit to do that? And here we're going to look at a monster of an opportunity, so nothing tiny, and the monster is actually all about this engine here. So this motorbike's a Ducati Monster, and it's renowned for this particular engine, this twin-cylinder V engine that they've developed, and it's best represented by the top-of-the-range motorcycle that they produce, and even the colour shouts fast, doesn't it? So what I want to do is just play you 55 seconds of a video just to get us in the mood. So I think that's enough of motorcycling to start you off. But what I just wanted to do was to highlight to you that this is one of the top motorcycles in the world, available for purchase at a showroom near you, and you can take it home and ride it on the road, but you can also ride it on the track as well. So very high spec. And Ducati have built a whole set of brand values around this. So I just wonder from you, from that 55 seconds, what do you think the brand values are that are coming through for Ducati in this motorcycle? Power, definitely. Excitement. Freedom. Yeah, these are good, aren't they? I mean, I can feel the price going up all the time, can't you? Yeah. Unique. So this is a high-value brand that's all about lifestyle, power, prestige. It'd be no surprise for you that you might need £20,000 to buy one of these. So who are the customers? Who's going to buy one of these?
I would imagine a middle-aged man.
Certainly someone with a little bit of disposable income. You tend to see when the helmets come off these bikers, they tend to be male, they tend to have grey hair. Yeah? Because they've had to acquire a little bit of money along the way to do this. So here's a challenge for Ducati. It's built a whole business on this top end, high value, high margin. And that market's sort of flat. A lot of competition in it. And their challenge is, how are they going to break into a new market? So let's just look at this in a little bit more detail. I've got another 55-second video to show you. So here we've got potentially a very different sort of motorcycle. the first thing you might notice is it's called Ducati, but that's the second word. It's actually called the Scrambler. So what we'll do is just watch 55 seconds of this video and see if you can see the difference. I think we'll stop it there. So hopefully you might have got a bit of a sense of a difference there. So what do you think the brand values are for the Scrambler Ducati? Cool, adventure. In a different way, yeah. Yeah, so if I ask you that same question, who are the customers? Young? Male and female. In fact, we pause the video, it goes on, helmets come off, and it's a young woman and a young man driving, each with their own motorbike. A very different demographic. Now, this is not £20,000, it's £99 a month. That's how it's being sold. So what Ducati are doing is they've realised they've got to innovate and they've got to explore a new opportunity, and they've gone completely away from their existing customer market, and they've even almost subtext Ducati, because Ducati means nothing to young, cool people. So what I want to explore in this talk is really that sort of behaviour. How do you make that happen? Now, we're going to see some young companies, innovative companies doing this, but it's just as important for those big companies to be able to do this as those small companies. And of course, for us as citizens, it's really important that places like the NHS and government can do this sort of thing, really innovate. So that's what we're going to look at today. And in particular, I'm going to introduce you to the idea of business models. So we are going to go on a little bit of a safari, if you don't mind. So bear with me while I stretch this metaphor as far as I can. So we're going to go on a safari. We're going to look about how do ideas emerge, how do you develop the thinking about spotting of all the ideas you could do, which are the ones that really are a business opportunity. And then ultimately, we won't have time to explore this now, but you've got to exploit that opportunity as well. So, the reason this is important, the reason this is really important, is that in developed economies, we are short of jobs. Now, I know we've got a bit of a job creation going on in the UK at the moment, but the rest of Europe has got some major problems about job creation. Not just as a whole economy, but certain areas of the economy, particularly youth employment, there are major problems. So, how are we going to generate those new jobs? It's not going to come from government because they are in austerity. It's not going to come from the corporates because they've got to pay dividends to shareholders and shrink their headcount. Where it's going to come from is high growth firms. And very interestingly, what we're really interested in is these 1% of firms that actually generate a quarter of the new jobs. We call these, and to be one of these high growth firms, you need to be growing at about 20% a year for between 3 and 4 years, and have started from about, when you enter into this sort of area, around 600,000 turnover a year. So €1 million, growing at about 20% a year would get you into this high growth, and we'd actually call you a gazelle. How nice is that? So to say, what do you do? Well, I run a gazelle company. That sounds so much nicer at a dinner party. So what we're really interested in is these gazelle companies, because if we could understand how to support them and nurture them, we would generate more jobs, not just in the UK, but across Europe as well. So what this is all about is entrepreneurial thinking. It's how do you think entrepreneurial? How can you do it? How can other people do it? How can you foster that sort of thinking? And when I think about entrepreneurial thinking, I think about the attributes that people have, the background they come from, the experiences they've got in their lives, the network of individuals that they've built around them, and their value set. So to me, all of these things mold into this idea of entrepreneurial thinking. What I do is I notice when I talk to entrepreneurs, they might say something like, well, I have 100 ideas before breakfast. So they've got lots of ideas, and their big challenge is often, how am I going to select which ideas I should really exploit? And when I ask them, well, how did you know that that was the right idea? They will often say, I had a gut feel. Yeah? So it's very usual for me to hear that expression, I had a gut feel. Now, for me, it's not gut feel. We're not talking about acid indigestion here. What we're talking about is something that people have developed, an intuitive way of beginning to select ideas and which could be the real opportunity. So gut feel is really just a way of expressing that intuition. And the other thing they might say is, well, I developed a business plan. I rarely hear that, if I'm honest. Normally the reason people do a business plan is why? Sometimes to justify the gut feel, that's true. To get money. Often it's because the bank's saying, if you want to borrow this £100,000, I want a business plan. All right then. So we've gone from gut feel to business plan, and really what I look at is something that we can do that's in between that. So business models are a way of bridging that gut feel and that business plan, because we actually know as entrepreneurs we only do business plans because the bank asks us for them, but actually we could do with something a little bit more robust than, oh, I've got a gut feel. Because how do you share a gut feel? How do you communicate? As your enterprise grows and gets bigger, how do you communicate that? You can't just go into a room of employees, got 100 people and say, I've got a gut feel that we need to be selling cheaper motorbikes. Yeah, that's fine, but our jobs are at risk, and so we want something a little bit more robust than that. So we are going to look at business models in that. And the whole purpose of doing this is to move from idea generation, 100 ideas before breakfast, to which is the one idea I'm going to work on now, which is the one idea I'm going to invest my limited time and resources in, which is my winner, and ultimately, how do I exploit that in an enterprise? Well, in an hour, we can't solve all of these, but I want to just sort of whet your appetite and maybe just ask you to think slightly differently at the end of this evening. And the whole point of doing this is entrepreneurship is no different from tennis, from anything. If you want to get good at something, you've got to do it. And the more times you do it, the better you get. And I don't know if any of you are readers of Outliers, this Malcolm Cresswell book around 100,000 hours, where really if you look at people who perform at the highest level, they're not gifted and talented, they've worked really hard. So entrepreneurs are just the same. And so what we see is that entrepreneurs get better at this. We see serial entrepreneurs who will sometimes say, well, it's taken me half the amount of time to grow my second business to the same level as my first business. So it is something that you can get good at. So what about a few stories to help us see this? So I want to tell you a story about a long way from home. This is from sheep to shop. So again, we're just holding on to the animal metaphor slightly here. And we're not interested in the bracken here. What we're interested in is high altitude sheep. In particular, we're interested in the sheep that are farmed in New Zealand. And they don't live right at the top of the mountains, but they are high altitude sheep. And what's interesting about them is their wool. So if you're a sheep at high altitude, you need your wool to have three properties. It needs to be light, it needs to be lofty, so keep you warm, and it's got to wick. It's got to get rid of sweat quickly, because you don't want moisture on you that could freeze. So if you could take that wool, and this is merino wool, and already you've twigged what this is all about. So merino wool has the same properties that those sheep want. It's light, it's lofty, and it wicks. I was trying not to use the word sweat, but of course, if you think about some of the things that you might want to do as an individual, where you do sweat, you want to get rid of that sweat as quickly as possible. So what we've seen is a whole industry in New Zealand develop around merino wool, and not surprisingly, here's a company in New Zealand that has a base layer made out of merino wool. So how many of you own an item that has got merino wool in it? Yeah. And many of you will be sports enthusiasts, and you'll be used to the idea of base layer, mid layer, outer shell. So this is a whole industry, and there's margin here. Yeah? So we're taking what is effectively a low value product. Wool's quite difficult. You don't get much for a fleece these days. I'm not saying you should rush into farming, but if you did go into farming, sheep may not be the highest margin area. But the merino wool is potentially very useful. And in the UK, we saw a company called Howies emerge to take this opportunity on. How many of you have heard of Howies? Excellent. Yeah. How many of you own a Howies item? What do you own?
I've got a cycling jacket and I've got a merino one.
Excellent. Yeah. So it's working, isn't it? And what we saw here is that Howies was launched by Claire and David, who were outdoor enthusiasts, and effectively said, I want product that will help me enjoy my snowboarding, my mountain biking. And so they built a business based on that. Who bought Howies in 2006? Does anyone know? It's a global outdoor clothing brand. Well, footwear brand, actually.
Adidas?
No, not Adidas. When I put them up, you'll recognize them straight away. Everybody heard of Timberland? Yeah. So why did Timberland buy a little clothing company based in Cardigan Bay in Wales? Why would they do that? These are truly global companies. It's a £2 billion company, Timberland.
Product innovation and supply chain.
Could be. They wanted innovative products. They wanted access to the supply chain. Anything else?
Quality.
Could be quality. Could be branding. Couldn't it? So all of these things are part of the calculation. But what's interesting is that they made the decision to acquire a really tiny company turning over about 5 million. That's not a lot, really, where these people are turning over 2 billion. So, who bought Howies in 2012?
VF Corporation.
Well, actually, it was that as the VF Corporation bought Timberland, VF Corporation looked at the portfolio and said, we don't want Howies. So they allowed for an MBO. So they allowed a management buyout. So well done. You're the first person ever to know it was the VF Corporation that bought Timberland. And I think they might be, are they a £12 billion global? Are they own Wranglers? Yeah, is it higher than that even? Well, there we are. So what, they may be 20 billion. Yeah, wow. So we're talking big business compared to Howies. So here we see Howies now back actually under management buyout on their own 3 feet, as they like to describe it. And what's interesting is certainly consumers I knew through this journey had no idea that Howies was owned by Timberland, was sold by Timberland. They were too involved in the brand. And here we see David and Claire, who founded the business. What do you think David and Claire went on to do next, once they exited to Timberland? They did indeed. They set up another business. No surprise, here they are, actually into denim. So they started producing salvage jeans, because denim is highly environmentally unfriendly. It's a very toxic environment. So they buy old denim and they remanufacture it as jeans, and they'll charge you £200 for a pair of jeans. Yeah? But at least you feel good as you walk around in them. Yeah? So I think what's interesting about this story is we see how an entrepreneur sees an opportunity, develops a business, a larger company thinks, my goodness, I could do with some of that, innovation, whatever it is, supply chain, branding, and it's acquired. And the entrepreneur then goes on to develop another business. So what we're seeing here is a very simple process of idea generation, opportunity recognition, and then exploitation as an enterprise. So, just to take us a little bit further on our journey, let's look at another example. And this is one that you're going to know very well. So unlike Howies, where you may not have heard of Howies, you know the answer to this already. So how many of you are eating 5 a day? A smattering. How many of you are trying to eat 5 a day? It's on my to-do list. Yeah? And we all know why, because we'll live longer, we'll be happier and healthier. Yeah? So, and we've got that message out there. The NHS has done a very good job, and apparently in Australia it's 7 a day, and 2 have got to be green, and I'm losing interest. Yeah? So I've got the 5 a day. Well, and of course, if you were going to look for a company with the resources to begin to say, well, how could I take that 5 a day and translate it into a business opportunity? Surely it's going to be PepsiCo, one of the biggest beverage companies in the world. Surely they were the ones who would develop this market. And you know it wasn't them. It wasn't even the people who like to say yes. It wasn't even Del Monte. It was a brand new startup from nowhere who developed into this market and literally have taken this market by storm. So here we see a business developing what seemed like a good idea. You've heard the story, have you, about how they validated whether it was a good idea or not? Yeah. So went to the festival, try our smoothie. If you like it, put your container here. If you don't like it, put it here. And this one's overflowing and that one's empty. We've gone from good idea to business opportunity in 2 buckets, haven't we? Yeah. So that's what they did. They built that business. Who owns Innocent Smooths now? Coca-Cola. In April 2010, Coca-Cola purchased 58% of the company. How much do they own now? 100%. Not quite 100, 90%. Yeah. So, in the UK, the major competition is Tropicana. Who owns Tropicana?
PepsiCo.
Yeah. So here's PepsiCo buying Tropicana. So Coca-Cola didn't invent the smoothie. Pepsi didn't invent the smoothie, but they had the resources to acquire the companies that did. This is a $1 billion market, of which the smoothies is around about £250 million a year. So when you go into a supermarket and you're feeling good and healthy and you're on your 5 a day and you think, oh, I'm going to be good to myself, you've got the own brand, but we don't want to buy cheap because we're going to be good to ourselves. So we see we've got Innocent and Tropicana. And we could buy one of those and feel really good. But what we're actually doing is choosing between Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. But we've just got to remind ourselves that it was this entrepreneurial behavior that allowed this market to emerge in the same way. And of course, we can see why the big corporates, because they weren't able to do it, had to tap into that know-how. And here's the entrepreneurial team, a little bit older than they started their journey on, and also now trying to innovate in their own way with, looks like pot noodles without the noodles to me. So,
They've still got 10%.
I don't know who has the 10%. Whether it's even the foundation, I'm not sure. So what we've got here is, for me, is beginning to introduce you the idea that if we're going to start to analyse what's going on, we need some sort of way to move from gut feel, not as far as business plan. So my argument to you is that one of the ways to start thinking about business opportunities is starting to try and describe them to yourself and then ultimately to other people. So in opportunity business model, we've got, I just simply call them dimensions. So when I'm looking at a business idea, I say, what's the proposition? What is the value proposition as perceived by the customer? Not me, not the entrepreneur, but the customer. And actually, could I express that value in 7 words? And then I've got something, haven't I? If I could understand my customer and express the value that they see in my opportunity in 7 words, I would then begin to be able to say, well, actually, I've got 3 things I need to do. This is the strongest one. I'm going to put my resource and effort. But before I commit, who's involved? Who do I need to make this happen? Who are the people? Obviously, it's me, my entrepreneurial team, my management team, my suppliers, my customers, my network, and I start comparing my ideas. Well, where's my strongest network? Oh, that's a more reliable network. That's a stronger value proposition. Where in the world am I going to do this? So who are my competitors? Who are my customers? What are the things I need to be really good at if I'm going to succeed with this business idea? And ultimately, why am I doing it? Where's the profit? What's the stakeholder involvement in this business? So when all I'm asking entrepreneurs to do is to say, just pause before you go with gut feel and write the business plan for the bank, is to start to structure your thinking in this way. So that's one element of business models, is to think about how do I describe an idea and then how do I share an idea. The next really important part of business models is to start thinking about the drivers. So it's all very well having a really good idea, the network, the market, and all the things that you need. But ultimately, you've got to see how your business proposition lines up to drivers. And these are things which are outside of your control. So we know that Howies, for example, did not develop the market for high-performance garments for people in doing extreme sports. but they were aware of that driver and aligned their new business to that opportunity. It wasn't innocent that promoted the idea of 5 a day. It was years of research on healthy living that said in order to be healthy you need 5 a day. They took that driver and said, well, if we developed a smoothie, which was effectively 1 or 2 of your 5 a day, we could ride on the back of that driver. So whenever I'm looking at business ideas, I want them to be articulated clearly so I can compare ideas with others to choose which is the opportunity. And ultimately, I really like to see a driver that the entrepreneur is aware of. Some of them are very specific to industries because some entrepreneurs are very close to their market and the driver's very local. But often you can find some big drivers. And I've got an example for you at the moment. So what I think is really exciting is when you see someone who can articulate their idea beyond gut feel, they know what the value is perceived by the customer, they know who's involved, they know where the market is, they know what key process is, and they know where the margin is. And if you see all those, and then you see some drivers, you think, well, actually, this could be more than a good idea. It could be a real business opportunity. So, this is my last video. I'm going to play you the first 55 seconds, and then I'm going to jump to the last minute. And you'll appreciate why as soon as you see this. I'll spare you the rest. So this story is about, is Britannia still cool? So what were the 2 big British brands we've just seen there? And the Queen. Top brands, aren't they? Yeah. What other 2 big brands did we use in the opening ceremony? Mercilessly. Mr. Bean. We did the NHS, but before that we had somebody going up the Thames. David Beckham. In fact, it wasn't just, it was the Beckham family, I think. We could call it the Beckham dynasty. So what we saw is absolutely top marketing for Cool Britannia. So I'm just going to leave that for a moment and move into the story proper. What are the brand values we associate with Cool Britannia?
We're still relevant somehow.
That we're relevant, but let's take this towards a product and a service view. What brand values could you pick up from this? Humour, the British sense of humour. If you saw a product and it said made in Britain, what would that mean? What would it could be heritage, relevance, quality, style. Yeah, I can feel the price going up again. Yeah, this is about margin, isn't it? Yeah. So what we see here is really around that. And I mean, just here, just to stress the point, here we've got, of course, James Bond. Who's this? Velodrome. This is the winning Velodrome team. The top cycling team in the world, probably the top sports team in the world at this moment. All the engineering that went into, all the science, all the technology. This is singing a modern Britain, isn't it? And, of course, what you see is people beginning to take that and put it on their product. So, that's definitely a driver out there. And what's interesting, well, I'll come on to that later, actually. This is pulling opportunities out of the bag. You'll see that I'm not a journalist, so excuse the puns all the time here. So here we've got, which company is this about, this story? The...
Is it colour in the title?
no, but it's the something Satchel company? Cambridge Satchel Company. Ooh, that's a lovely brand name I've just thrown in there. Cambridge, I'm thinking high quality. So, what we've got is the Cambridge Satchel Company. Have you familiar with the story of Julia and the Cambridge? Let me share that with you, and you'll see this is very interesting because what it does, it makes us think really hard about drivers. Not just, is this a business a good idea? Can we describe the dimensions? But actually, what are the drivers behind this? So, a very big success story. We're looking at a company turning around £10 million. It's got 3 shops in the UK, 2 in London. It's got a franchise deal going with Paperchase. It's launched in 2009 with £700 to start with, and we've now got a turnover of about 10 million. Which export market should they look at? Japan? Anywhere else? US? Why Japan?
British stuff sells over there.
Okay.
China, I would have thought.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, that's true. I saw an article about that recently. Yes. Well, US because...
Duchess of
Yeah, Duchess of Cambridge. And, you know, St. Cambridge Cattle Company do not employ the Duchess of Cambridge. But, by goodness, that's a bit free. And why China, David?
Because there's a lot of school kids there.
Yeah. So, let's play the story out. What we see, actually, the market that Julia Dean has decided to go for is China. And the reason she's done this is because of this shift. The growth in the middle class in China is growing exceptionally well. This is a huge market. China is about to become the biggest economy in the world. Yeah? There's another reason why she chose China. We'll see in a minute. But what we've got here is a growing middle class, and one way that you describe your wealth to people is the things you wear and the things you drive or ride if you're into motorbikes. So this is what we're seeing, is the demand for premium product. What's really interesting is that in order to finance this growth, it was beyond the means that Julia developed. She'd only been running the business for 4 years. There wasn't a lot of retained capital. So she went out and got venture capital funding of £13 million. She doubled her production to 100 staff. She set up an apprenticeship scheme because most people who make leather things are older, and she needed a whole new generation coming on. So really good apprenticeship story, and this is why she chose China. We're back to gut feel now. Julia says, customers from China come when they visit London. They know the brand and they seek out one of my 2 stores. I know the demand is there. She's got that gut feel here. And here we've got Index Ventures, which is one of the biggest venture capital companies in Europe, saying that this is one of Europe's most entrepreneurial story. Remember that Julie Dean, here's Julie, set this company up with £700. She set it up with her mother, Frida, who was in her 80s when they launched the company. And now we're talking about one of Europe's most entrepreneurial success stories. Here's the Satchel. Here's Julie. What's this? King's College, Cambridge. What's this? Hogwarts. I think you could be right. What's interesting is Julia's story and her why she set up the company. She says, I was reading Harry Potter, just dropping a global brand, to my children, and they said, oh, I'd love a satchel like Harry Potter. I didn't know Harry Potter had a satchel. And so she went online, couldn't find a high-quality satchel. So what do you do if you're an entrepreneur and you can't find something? You make it yourself. So she didn't know anything about leather, but she happened to live in Cambridge. They make a lot of saddles, apparently, on the fens. And so she got them commissioned and made, and then she got all sorts of things behind this success story. But what we've got to do is to pause for a moment and think, how could we describe this business? And what we've also got to do is think about what's driving this business. So, what are the things outside of Julia's control which are helping this business grow? What are they? The Chinese economy. There's no way Julie is doing anything to make China the biggest economy in the world. And she's good, Julie. She's not that good. Yeah. What else is happening? Yeah. The whole issue around Cool Britannia. Julie does not know the Queen. She does not know Daniel Craig. These are things that are happening completely outside of her control. But what she's doing is she's got together her value proposition. She knows who she needs to make this happen, what the key processes are, hence investing in apprentices. And she's got a network of designers around her that are helping her to develop this brand. She knows the market she wants to go for, and she knows where the profit is because she can see it. And these bags are not cheap. How much does a satchel cost?
£30?
Not £30.
300 or 400, yeah.
I think £130. Entry level. Yep. So she's got the margin there. So really, when we unpick this success story, we need to be able to describe Julie's business because there are plenty of people who can make satchels. I could set up a satchel company. I don't know anything about satchels. Doesn't matter because I just bring someone into my network to do it. I would learn very quickly. But of course, the other thing we've got to do is to pick up some of these drivers and the know-how. So all I'm really saying to you is that business models provide you an intellectual framework when you can start to write this down, think it through. You've got 4 ideas. Let's just run through the business model. Okay, what are the dimensions? What are the drivers? Okay, of these 4 things, that's where I'm going to put my money, my time, my effort. I can only do one thing. I don't know how you may be able to multitask, but I normally have to do one thing at a time and make sure I do it well. And that's what entrepreneurs do. So the other thing we've just got to pause on and reflect a little bit is that this doesn't happen in a vacuum. So entrepreneurs don't just live in an entrepreneurial bubble. They actually live in markets where you will find competitors and you'll find customers or potential customers. And so the other thing that entrepreneurs have got to do is to understand their marketplace. And that might be deeply personal knowledge they have from being in the industry for 30 years, from being in a family business for however many generations. So this deep market knowledge is really valuable. And what entrepreneurs are often trying to do is to find a gap in the market where they cannot find a competitor who can offer exactly what it is they offer. So at the moment that Julia goes global, nobody can quite offer the product quality, branding, and reputation that she's got. So she can see a gap. And the other thing that entrepreneurs are good at is they don't think I can sell this to everyone in the world. They get really close to their customers and they understand who their potential customers are. And eventually they narrow it down to a segment that's big enough to be worth the effort and large enough to generate the profit. And if they can find that sweet spot of a gap in the market, a customer group that's yet to be addressed in the way that they want to, they can really begin to accelerate their business. So when we look at Innocent Smoothie and we look at the Cambridge Satchel Company, we can see those 2 things happening, coming together. Some of that is down to the entrepreneur and some of it's down to luck. But actually, what you notice is that entrepreneurs get very good at this type of thinking. So, I have to issue a health warning now, because I would be folly for me to say, as I come to the end of this, that entrepreneurship is all around boxes, 2 dimensions, 4 dimensions, 5 drivers. No. All this is an intellectual tool that you can use to look at ideas to find out which are the ones that are real business opportunities. So when you've done that, throw it away. This isn't to be chiseled in stone and put on the boardroom table, because as soon as you go to market, the market changes. And you've got to do this. It's a continuous cycle of reflection, thinking, right, okay, now I've got some more choices. What do I have to do? It's exhausting being an entrepreneur. That's because the whole world is changing around you all the time. So it's not a one-off event, corporate strategy, that's it done for 5 years. That's right, we've done it now, we've gone to market, let's do our next one. So we've got time, I think, to just say a couple of things about the Goldman Sachs program, and then I want to finish with my sort of final story. To prove myself wrong, I think. That's what I hope. So we've been running the Goldman Sachs program. I can see Helen and Viv who have been on it, so good to see you in the audience. And we've now been running it for 5 years. We launched it in Yorkshire. We did the pilot from the US program. Been very successful. It's now rolled out in London through UCL, Birmingham with Aston, and Manchester with MMU. We now have 1,000 businesses that have been through this, and these are high growth businesses. And I thought I would share with you 4 things that I felt, as being involved in the program, have come out to me. So I think this is all about entrepreneurs developing a capital plan. in the old Dickensian sense of the word capital. Capital idea. So what I mean by capital is knowledge. So knowledge is capital. We live in the knowledge economy. And I would like to think a little bit of the curriculum on the programme was new knowledge to the participants. I wouldn't over-egg that, if I'm honest. I think they actually know a lot already. But the curriculum just makes sure we've covered all the bases. So there's a bit of capital in knowledge. There's also a bit of capital around a finance plan. We call it the business growth plan rather than the business plan, because it's about how do you raise finance or accumulate resources. That means you don't have to raise finance to grow your business. So we all the participants produce a growth plan at the end of it. The other thing they have is social capital. So often the entrepreneur has been working in isolation. Having gone on the program with 30 participants, they emerge with a peer network of people just like them. And if you've got a problem, who do you call? Not Ghostbusters, but you phone your friends, don't you? And so you phone your peers and you say, I've got this issue, what can you do? So what we see is accumulation of capital knowledge, capital in terms of finance, social capital, and the other thing we see is, I would just call it personal capital. This is about confidence. Running a business can wear you down. So anything that can give you that boost of confidence, say, actually, you're the right person to lead this business, is about your personal capital. So when you see all these things come together, I think that in many ways what we've done is helped those high growth firms to achieve many of those connections. So with 10 minutes to go, I'm going to give you the final story. Chocolate is what we're going to talk about now. And what you'll see is that chocolate, we have a long-standing love affair with chocolate. There's something deeply comforting about chocolate, and what I'd like to do is to share with you a company that's really taken that to the nth degree. And there's one picture here that probably stands out a little bit. Immediately you'll see that it's about delivery. So what company am I going to talk to you about? Hotel Chocolat. And I even say it as Hotel Chocolat because it sounds higher price already, doesn't it? Not Hotel Chocolate, but Hotel Chocolat. So what Hotel Chocolat did was really interesting, is they changed the way that people eat chocolate, I think. How many of you ever subscribed to Hotel Chocolat's delivery service? Well, I thought, so because I met the joint MD, I thought maybe I should actually become a customer. So I subscribed, and I was out at work and the chocolates arrived, and when I got back they were in the box. Nobody touched the box. It just said Nigel Lockett delivery, so they left it. But I got the chocolates out, cut them open, and everyone gathered around the family and, oh, what are these? Oh, they're chocolates. So in 4 weeks' time, because I subscribed to the 4-week subscription, the chocolates arrived. I got back from work. They weren't sitting in the hall waiting to be opened. They were out and the knife was ready. Dad, the chocolates have arrived. So I've gone from Nigel eating a Snickers bought in a petrol station and hiding the wrapper to Nigel going home and the whole family sitting around talking, eating and enjoying chocolates. And all they did is they put chocolates in a box that could fit through a letterbox. Quintessentially British thing, letterboxes. They're not all over the world, letterboxes. So here we see Hotel Chocolat. Of course, you'd expect lots of chocolates on Valentine's Day. I always seem to be disappointed. But there are other times of the year. And of course, if you're really good at this business, what you do is you make enough profit, you buy your own cocoa plantation, of course, don't you? Yeah? Who do you get to open it for you? What about HRH? HRH Prince Charles. Why didn't we get him to open it for us? And there's Peter, who I met. And here's the box. Very frustrating. There's only 2 of each type. 6 people in our family. That's a lot of chopping to do it fairly. But interestingly, you log in and you score them, because what you're trying to do is to influence the contents of the next box. I'm not a great one for orange creams, lemon creams. It's never quite... So I'm voting those down, and I'm voting up praline. Yeah. And that's what everyone else is doing. So we've now got a community of people passionate about chocolate. So if you're that successful, what's your next thing?
Are you sharing the vote with the family? I'm just interested, or is it just yourself?
No, I've got to have to take over the voting. It's a responsible job. You can't delegate something as important as that. So what do you do next? If you're a mail order company selling chocolates, you might know the answer.
You need referrals, don't you?
Well, no, but what's the next route to market you could go for? High Street. Here we have, you open stores. And many of you have been into Hotel Chocolat stores? Yeah, they're now all over the place, aren't they? And of course, you're getting really good at this now. You really are profitable. What could you do next? Buy a hotel. And why not open it on your cocoa plantation? And why not persuade the cruise ships to call? Suddenly, we've now got another whole market. They are really sailing. What do they do next? No, they don't sell, but they must be tempted. I'm sure they've been approached. What they do next is, of course, you open fine dining. So now you can have chocolate as a starter, chocolate as a main course, and chocolate for dessert. So, in fact, ironically, maybe not ironically, if you are going to open fine dining with chocolate, you apparently do it in Leeds. So, Hotel Chocolat's first restaurant, I think they have one in London now, and the other in Leeds. So there must be a lot of Yorkshire folk who are happy because of this. So what I want to do with this story is just illustrate the fact that actually innovation and entrepreneurship can come in surprising areas. So I thought I'd just share a couple of little things that are interesting about this company. Here's Peter talking to Lloyds Bank. Yep. So what Peter's doing there is asking for money. And Peter will have got some money, but he didn't get enough. He couldn't get the bank to give him enough money to raise the money to expand at this rate. So what did he do?
Chocolate bonds.
Chocolate bonds. Here we have Peter talking. If you go to the CBI website, Google it, raised £4 million in chocolate bonds. Now, you don't get paid interest in cash. What's your interest paid in?
Dividend chocolate.
Chocolate. It's getting better all the time, isn't it? Yeah. So what we hear, and the bonds are between £2,000 and £4,000. So it depends how much you like chocolate, isn't it? But what's interesting is an innovation. So hit the barrier of couldn't raise finance and developed a chocolate bond. So really what I'm saying in this story is to finish slightly light-hearted, because most business schools professors will come and say, you've got to think outside the box. Yeah? But I actually think with Hotel Chocolat, they were doing some thinking inside the box. So I think that's a really good point to end. And just really say this whole talk has been really about how do entrepreneurs begin to stand out from the herd, because it's a very crowded market. And I hope what I've done is shared a few sort of insights and stories that have helped you think about maybe business models might be one way in which entrepreneurs can help them begin to think about how they could share their idea and move from gut feel without going to all the pain of producing a business plan. So thank you very much. I think you're right, and the whole crowdfunding environment has changed. So in the last 10 years, we've seen a whole emergence of alternative financing. Some of it things like Kickstarter, but it doesn't need to be Kickstarter. It could be others where you're not selling equity. You might be getting a loan, and your interest might not be money. It could be in the product. Yeah. Could be, yeah. So that's a really good point. So there are more and more innovative ways of raising finance. I think it's about a portfolio financing in the end, because you need different financing for different things. But I have certainly seen things like Kickstarter do really well. And of course, if you've got a social innovation, you can also raise money on digital platforms to deal with social enterprise. Yeah. Well, I would agree with you, and I would say, reflecting on my own entrepreneurial background before I went into academia, I was best when I was focused on one thing. I was not as good when I'd got lots of diversification. So we were a healthcare distribution company in the community. And when we focused on that, and we did it well, we made profit. When we started diversifying to manufacturing, into consumer, we started to dilute our effort. But I can't really criticise Hotel Chocolat because they seem to be succeeding. But from my own experience, I was better when I was focused. Well, you'll appreciate this story. When I first met Peter, he wasn't running a company called Hotel Chocolat. Do you know what their name of the company was before it became Hotel Chocolat? Choc Express, right? Does that shout premium? No. So I remember meeting Peter this third time, and he said, Nigel, I've got really exciting news. What is it? I thought he was going to talk about a new information system, or whatever it was. We've changed our name. We've changed it to Hotel Chocolat. And as soon as he said it, I thought, oh, yes, that's absolutely right. So you're right, that even changing their name from Choc Express, which was the mail order service through your door, to Hotel Chocolat, allowed them to start developing these multiple channels. I mean, the common theme is chocolate. I don't know how, I mean, the chocolate, it's the cocoa plantation of the hotel. But, maybe if you look at Branson built multiple businesses.